Ladies and gentlemen, there is no shortage of different price points for PC gaming. If you're a gamer, then chances are good that you've heard of the 9900K, which is currently retailing at over $500 for just the processor. Couple in the motherboard and a high-end graphics card, and the price soon starts to mount up. But that doesn't mean that you can't get really nice performance out of a mid-range budget type of system. So MSI, along with other companies such as Cooler Master and Kingston, are working on a project known as the PC Gaming Roadmap. Now I want to make this clear, this is not a sponsored video. This system was sent to us for the purposes of just demonstrating performance for mid-range parts, but we do not get to keep the hardware, we are not being paid, this is not a sponsored video, this is simply media coverage. So what is a mid-range build then? Because we're going to go into the components of this as well as performance in just a moment. Well, the purpose of mid-range, at least to my opinion, and obviously everyone's different, is to give you really solid 1080p and entry-level 1440p performance. This means that games such as Fortnite and Overwatch and other competitive games will obviously have no issue. But perhaps more importantly, for some, you will also have more than sufficient performance to play the likes of Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Gears of War and other such AAA games at much better graphical fidelity than what you can find on a console, and also 60 FPS. So what are we looking at here? Well, this particular system has been created by CCL Computer Labs, which is based in the UK, but of course your retailer can vary, and if you want to go the pre-built route or whether you want to build your own is of course totally up to you. The heart of the system is an i5-8500 processor, more than that in just a moment, 16GB of HyperX memory by Kingston, a GTX 1060 graphics card, which is the 6GB model from MSI. The Cooler Master AIO provides the cooling for the system, and we also have a B360 Gaming Pro motherboard, which of course we have covered previously on the channel, hint hint, plug plug, and all of this is with the boot drive being a Kingston A1000 NVMe SSD. Now, just to be clear, this is a 240GB model, which quite frankly is probably going to be more than enough, and the case is by NZXT. So it's a really nice case actually, I quite like this case, it's very easy to work on. I've taken off the side panel just so that we don't get reflections and so that I can poke inside of it, which is not dangerous at all given the fact it's running, so that's fine. And of course, this system is pretty damn whisper quiet. It's kind of hard to hear because I'm going to be doing noise reduction and all that stuff, but trust me, the system is whisper quiet even under load, and it just makes a really nice case for itself, pardon the pun, as this type of configuration. Oh, and this is not part of it, it's just because all my Steam games are on here, so ignore that, it doesn't come with it. We also have a monitor as well, which has been supplied by MSI. This particular model is the Optex MAG241CR, very easy model number to remember there. And it is a curved LED monitor. It is 144 Hz, a high refresh rate, of course, very fast response time, 1 millisecond. But of course, if you don't need a monitor, that's certainly not something that you would need to purchase. You can by all means use a TV or your old monitor as well. And they have also supplied us a keyboard and mouse as well, which is now plonking on screen for you. We have a fairly good balance of components. 16GB of memory is more than adequate for today's gaming, and I suspect will be the case for some time. And a GTX 1060 is more than ample for 1080p and most games at 1440p, particularly if you're willing to make a few concessions here, particularly with, let's say, anti-aliasing. As for the i5-8500, it's certainly not as powerful as, let's say, the 8600K or some of the 9th generation parts, but most games are going to be GPU bound with this particular rig if you are popping the sliders, the graphics sliders, to their highest possible potential. With that said, you can get some good deals right now on 8600K. The problem is a B360 motherboard will not allow this particular set of processors to be overclocked, which means you're going to need to instead plonk in a Z370 motherboard, which will push up the price. Another alternative, which is very compelling without any question, would be an AMD Ryzen build. And you could certainly go for something like a Ryzen 7 or a Ryzen 5. We're going to actually be doing some builds with those in the not too distant future, so do stick around for that set of videos. But let's talk about the here and now with this system. It is pretty darn upgradable. So with the 1060, you can certainly have gone with something a little more powerful. As I'm recording this, which is very early November 2018, Pascal is being phased out, and obviously Turing is here to stay. The 1060 and below have not been replaced by NVIDIA, but the 1080 Ti, the 1080, the 1070, and 1070 Ti, or whatever you want to call them, are being phased out, and obviously they're being replaced with the 2070, you get the idea. But the long and short of it is the prices have gone down, and eBay is flooded right now with alternative cards. But with that said, in the short term, you could certainly have plonked in, let's say, a 1070 or even a 1070 Ti, depending on the resolution and your budget. But this is a really nice card as is, and quite frankly, a 1060 is probably going to be more than adequate for now. Or if you want to go the AMD route, you could go the RX 570 or the 580. They put out roughly the same level of performance. It depends, of course, on the game. Or you could possibly wait for a little bit, because the rumors are, at least at the time I'm recording this, RX 590 is going to be released in the next week or two, which in theory has slightly higher clock speeds. The rumors are around 200 megahertz compared to the 580. So in theory, at least, it should slightly outpace the 1060. So let's also discuss the other elephant in the room. Should you go with a company like CCL to put together your parts, or is it better to make your own system? Well, I'm an enthusiast, so typically I prefer to put together my own system, but there are a couple of caveats here. The first one is that, well, even I have limited time, and as regular viewers will know, I've had a little bit of a history of not actually taking care of my own PC. In fact, there was a time, regular viewers know this, that I had like a power supply that was hanging out the side of my PC for a number of weeks, just because I couldn't be bothered to replace the old one there, and Windows installs, and you get the idea. It's just one of those things. There is also the other potential, and that is that you're building it for a loved one, whether that's a friend, whether that's a relative, whether it's your significant other. You may simply not want to play technical support for that person if they've happened to be downloading something that's a bit naughty, and then they end up with a virus, or they, break their system, or it just simply fails naturally. Being a technical support for that person forever and a day is rather frustrating. They may be technically apt, so that might not be a big deal. They may simply be lacking time themselves to put together the system, in which case, in my opinion, pre-built is the way to go. And it also depends on pricing as well, because sometimes pre-built can work out cheaper. But of course, as always, it does depend upon you and your budget, and whether you have anything to carry over from a previous system. So for example, if you already have a really nice case, if you have a really nice power supply, if you have a good cooler which might be compatible with whatever the next generation processor you're going to put in, and so on, then that certainly might be a good reason to simply do an upgrade rather than just buy a pre-built system. So let's look at some raw performance numbers before moving on to some raw gameplay. So what conclusions can we draw from this, and what advice would I give you? Well, there are two factors when deciding upon a new computer. This is whether it's pre-built or you're building your own. The first is price. After all, the larger your budget, the greater your choices for components. If you have a higher budget, then you can put in a better graphics card, a better processor, and so on. The second thing is, what is your usage scenario? There's a really good chance that if you're building a gaming PC, it's going to be pretty darn good at other things. After all, think about the selection of parts. Typically, a gaming PC will have a pretty decent CPU, a decent amount of memory, and finally, a high-end graphics card. And all of those components do go a long way into, let's say, creating a decent Photoshop machine, or being able to be pretty darn fast at editing documents in Word. The face and components of PC gaming is forever changing, but the selection of parts on offer here do give you at least one way to go. That's not to say it's the best way. After all, you could certainly build a very competent AMD system, or you could go with a completely different choice in graphics card, perhaps a more powerful graphics card, and so on, depending upon your particular usage scenario. My best piece of advice to you would be, choose the components from the company that give you the best value for money. Don't buy Nvidia parts simply because they're from Nvidia, don't buy AMD parts simply because they're AMD, and so on. Buy the selection of components which is going to give you the best bang for your buck. This particular configuration is a really good example of a fairly balanced system, and of course could be configured slightly differently with a different CPU, with a better graphics card, and so on. And that really is the power of PC gaming. Not only do you get an unlimited selection of components and configurations that you can choose depending on your budget and your purpose for the system, but games of course can be infinitely configured, modded, and altered to your desire. With all of that said, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. Normal stuff if you have. Like, share, comment and subscribe. There is a lot more content coming up on the channel over the next several weeks, including a whole bunch of reviews, some analysis stuff, news of course, interviews, and well, just about everything else you could ever want. So you know what to do. You can click the subscribe button and the bell icon. You can comment below if you're deciding to build your own system, and tell us what specifications you're going to be going with, along with, of course, the resolution and your targeted games and whatever else you're wanting to do. With all of that said, take care of yourselves, and bye for now.